We continue with our celebration of Easter this morning, the third Sunday of Easter, for those of you keeping track. We're not finished with Easter, as if we could ever be finished with Easter. The centrality of Easter to the Christian faith, the very nature of the resurrection as the hub of the Christian wheel, cannot be celebrated one day and put away for the next 364. Easter demands our continued attention, with each and every Sunday being a little Easter, a reminder of why we are and who we are. So while the jelly beans and chocolate bunnies may now be things of the past, we're still celebrating the joy and wonder of Easter. The Easter story begins in Mark's Gospel with the story of Joseph of Arimathea asking Pontius Pilate for the body of Jesus. Joseph takes the body, wraps it in a piece of cloth, and puts it in the tomb. There was no time for the proper burial rites, for the Sabbath was beginning, so the body of Jesus is wrapped in a cloth and placed in a tomb, out of sight, out of mind. We began on Easter Day with the story of the resurrection from Mark's Gospel. 3 women make their way to the tomb in the early morning hours on the first day of the week. The conversation for the morning centered on one major theme: who would roll away the massive stone from the door to the tomb? But when they arrived, they found the stone rolled away and the body of Jesus missing. And then a young man in a white robe told them, "Do not be alarmed, for you are looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." Their response? According to Mark, they went home in fear and terror and said nothing to anyone. Last Sunday, we heard again the story from John's Gospel of Jesus appearing to the disciples on Easter evening. Thomas was not with the disciples and would not believe the story they told of Jesus appearing to them. Thomas set conditions for believing. "Unless I put my fingers in the mark of the nails and my hands in his side, I will not believe." But Jesus was not put off by Thomas's conditionality. Jesus essentially said to Thomas, "Do whatever it will take for you to believe." That unconditional acceptance offered by Jesus seems to have been enough, and Thomas declares in the presence of his Lord and his fellow disciples, "My Lord and my God." John's Gospel also includes the story of Peter and John running to the tomb early in the morning. John sees the empty tomb and immediately believes, while Peter sees the empty tomb and is totally confused and has no idea of what he should believe. It's in John's Gospel that we read the story of Mary Magdalene mistaking Jesus for the gardener and only recognizing him when she hears him speak her name. A little later, Jesus appears to the disciples by the Sea of Galilee and shares breakfast with them. In Matthew's Gospel, the women, again, are the first to learn of the resurrection, but in a twist on the other stories, the angel tells the women to tell the disciples to go back up to Galilee, and Jesus will meet them there. In Luke's Gospel, the story begins with Joseph of Arimathea, continues with the 3 women, Mary Magdalene, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, and Mary, the mother of James. They receive a word from an angel that Jesus has been raised, and they are instructed to go to the disciples and tell them what they have discovered. They do, but the disciples dismiss their words as an idle tale. Also in Luke's Gospel, we read the story of 2 disciples on their way to some place called Emmaus. No one's ever found it. When they are joined by a stranger on the road. As evening falls, they invite the stranger in to stay with them, and when they are at table, the stranger breaks bread, and the disciples immediately recognize the stranger as Jesus. And then comes our story for today, the story from Luke's Gospel of Jesus appearing to the disciples, sharing food with them, and then reminding the disciples that they were and are witnesses to all that has happened. Now the question has to be asked, what's going on here? How is it that a man who was as dead as a doornail keeps showing up after his death? Why doesn't Jesus just stay dead? Though the stories may vary, Though they may involve different characters and different events, there is one irrefutable thread that is common to all the stories. The common theme is simply this: Jesus was raised from the dead. Death was not the final word. Despair was not the final word. Imperial power was not the final word. Religious authority was not the final word. Denial was not the final word, and neither was betrayal. No human word or response could silence Jesus, for God had chosen Jesus and anointed him as God's messenger of life and peace to this earth. God chose to speak through the words, the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ in a way that had not been experienced before or since. The teachings, the examples, the faith, the life, the death, the resurrection of Jesus all showed in the clearest possible way who God is and who we might yet be. Our response to God's message in Jesus Christ was to kill the messenger. But God would not let that stand. We brutally killed Jesus, took his battered and broken body and placed it in a tomb out of sight, out of mind. That was it. No more Jesus to worry about. But as the eminent theologian Gracie Allen put it, never put a period where God has placed a comma. Don't be too quick to close the door on one who says, I set before you an open door. Don't content yourself with dismissing all this resurrection business as an idle tale. It's been tried before and it's failed. Just because you can't make it work in the logical processes of your mind, don't reject the witness of millions upon millions of Christians who claimed 20 centuries ago and who claim today Jesus Christ is risen.